Today I'm going to show you how to learn French in 6 months. I'm a native French speaker myself, and I've actually seen hundreds and hundreds of people fail to learn French. But I've also seen dozens and dozens of people who eventually succeeded. So my goal today is to show you kind of the process that successful French learners use to learn French very quickly. And today I'm going to show you how to do this in 6 months. I'm Louis Lin, and I'm the founder of louislin.com. Today I'm going to show you a 3-step process that represents sort of all of the things I have observed that successful French learners do in order to quickly learn French. So let's get started. I just want to preface this video just by saying that everything I'm going to show you here assumes that you're going to learn French on your own. Most successful French learners I have seen actually never stepped a foot in a classroom. I think there's just something to it. Learning French on your own is just so much more practical and you can go much faster. So that's what I'm going to show you. I'm also going to tell you exactly how long you should spend in each step, although those are just, approximations. But first, I want to address the question of how long does it take to learn French? The guidelines I'm going to show you here are meant to show you a process for learning French in 6 months. Of course, 6 months is very short for learning a language, so you're going to have to put in the hours. My recommendation would be you need to put in at least 2 hours a day. Now, I know that this may sound completely crazy. I mean, who has 2 hours a day? Like, who has 1 hour a day? But you don't need to actually spend 2 hours a day actively studying. You can spend a lot of this time just listening when you're commuting or just reading things that you like. So my recommendation would be that you spend around 2 hours every day studying French, and then you can do more on weekends if you have time. Also, it's very important that you choose the right time of the day to learn French, because if you're just counting on the time that you have after a long day of work, that may not work and you're not going to be consistent. But with the methods I'm going to show you here, you should be able to actually learn French pretty passively during your commute or when you're doing other stuff like washing dishes. Before we get started, I also want to touch a little bit on concentration. And I know it's kind of a trend nowadays, especially for young people. When you're studying or working, you're always getting interrupted by notifications and you want to go on Instagram or any kind of social network, check your emails. And that's probably one of the most detrimental things I have seen among language learners in general. If you want to become fluent in a language, especially in a short amount of time, like 6 months, you really need to be very focused and spend all of your time in deep work. So forget about your smartphone, put it on plane mode, and just stay focused on the task. Okay, so the first step I'm going to talk about is goal setting. You shouldn't go into this French learning journey just thinking, okay, I'm going to learn French in 6 months. You should have precise goals. I should also add that at the beginning, it's really a good time to sort of explore what kind of methods you like to use when learning French. Just to be clear, according to Dr. Stephen Krashen, we all learn languages in the exact same way. However, different people have different ways that they prefer to use to learn a language. So before you get started, I just want you to know that if you're using a method at the beginning and you don't like it, it's okay to switch. In fact, I'm learning many languages and I often switch methods because I get tired or I want to do something new, and that's completely okay. So different people have different learning styles. For people who like learning by reading, I would suggest definitely books. First of all, definitely consider a grammar book. I'm not a huge advocate of grammar. I think it can be helpful, but scientific evidence shows that grammar helps, but it's just not the whole picture. So get yourself a grammar book and just read at least the basics. I wouldn't recommend actually going through the advanced sections of grammar books, but at least get a feel for French grammar and French conjugation, especially French conjugation, because it tends to be much more complex than in other languages. Now, there are other people who learn best by listening, and that's my case. I just love listening because you can do it passively. You just have earphones or a headset. In this case, I would definitely recommend using something like a podcast or some sort of flashcard tool that allows you to listen to what you're learning at the same time. There's also something else I really like. It's some tools allow you to actually listen to stories. I think for me, my favorite way of learning is just listening to stories. And unfortunately, there are not many resources on the internet to listen to French stories that are not too hard and not too easy. I'm actually considering developing a platform with, many great stories in French that you can listen to. And I would like to integrate this with sort of a flashcard app so that the software would just feed you stories and make you review all of the vocabulary from the stories at the right time. For now, I haven't developed this tool, but you can always check out goalsetting.com and maybe, depending on when you're watching this video, it may already be out. Finally, if you're a visual learner, then definitely consider videos. I'm not really big on YouTube, ironically, because if you're trying to learn a language on YouTube, the problem is you have the suggested videos and your focus tends to not be really good. You just get in this black hole of consuming videos. But there is a very good website if you like to learn languages with videos. I think it's called Fluent. I've used Fluent in the past, and what they do is that they have multiple YouTube videos and they transcribe what is said in the videos and you have the translation with it. It's really good. So still in this first step, I would recommend getting a textbook, but specifically I think you should get a textbook that not only has grammar rules and conjugation and vocabulary, but also more natural conversations. Because the thing is, with all those French rules, grammar, conjugation, it just sounds very abstract. But once you have a dialogue, a conversation in front of you, especially if you can listen to it, then everything becomes so much more concrete. All right, now let's talk about step 2, the grind. Okay, now I'm calling this the grind because some people at this point are gonna start burning out and they're gonna quit. Step 1 probably lasts somewhere around 1 to 2 months, and people are excited, they want to learn French. But then at the 2-month mark, at the beginning of step 2, when you should be really going all out and practicing, I would say probably 75-80% of people are gonna quit. Why is this? I think it's because most people realize that at this point learning French actually takes a long time. Step 2 is called the grind because you have to put in the hours. The truth is, I think that most people quit because they actually didn't do step 1 right. They couldn't find a method that was actually right for them. But as I told you, you have to take into account your learning style. If you prefer reading, then definitely do that. If you prefer listening, then podcast. If you prefer videos, then just do your own thing. One thing that I will say is that at this point during step 2, some people are not going to quit, but the way that they study is so ineffective that it's not going to lead them anywhere. So here's the biggest problem I see with most language learners. They don't focus on vocabulary. And the truth is, whether you're learning French, Japanese, Chinese, any language, the biggest barrier to you understanding a native speaker and you speaking the language is a lack of vocabulary. And I've seen it over and over and over again, where people are just focusing on the grammar, the conjugation, and trying to speak and doing fancy exercises. But at the end of the day, they don't know the words. Okay, so this brings us to the question of what is the best way to learn French vocabulary? I struggled with this a long time myself. The scientific evidence is very clear. Flashcards are the best way of learning vocabulary. Okay, so I'm gonna read to you some text from an ebook from Dr. Paul Nation, a linguist from New Zealand. If you're not doing deliberate learning through using bilingual word cards, but instead are spending time doing a variety of vocabulary-related exercises, you are likely to be learning vocabulary at less than half the rate that you could easily achieve. So there you go. This is based on scientific studies. Science shows that using word cards, just flashcards in general, is an extremely effective way of learning vocabulary. I don't want to endorse a particular app or software here. Personally, I'm using a free tool called Enki. Enki is a flashcard application application that you can download off of the internet. Unfortunately, Enki is kind of hard to use, so if you're not really computer savvy, it's probably not the best tool for you. However, as I said, I'm currently developing a tool that combines stories and flashcards, so you have entire stories on a flashcard that you can listen to, and then it comes back in the future just at the right time for you to review. If you want to be notified when I release this app, just go to my website at lewislin.com and there's an opt-in there. I'll send you a link if you want to become a beta tester for free. Alright, now let's talk about step 3. So you've been through step 1, which is kind of finding the right method for you. You also went through step 2, where you learned tons of vocabulary, listened to a lot of stories, and just did the grind. Now, step 1 and step 2 don't involve any speaking, and that's very much by design. I noticed with myself and a lot of other language learners that trying to speak from the beginning is pretty useless. At the beginning, you should really be focusing on reading and listening and trying to get all of those words and grammatical structures inside of your brain. Trying to speak too early just isn't useful because you haven't assimilated anything yet. So it's very likely that you're gonna try to speak in ways that aren't really optimal, and you may even be reinforcing bad habits. However, in step 3, it's finally time to get speaking. You don't actually need a lot of time to practice speaking. So if step 1 took you, say, 1 month and step 2 took you about 4 months, I would recommend that the last step only last for 1 month. So in total, you're spending 1 month sort of finding your way through all of the methods. You're spending 4 months really learning French, and you're spending the last month trying to perfect your speaking. So as far as speaking goes, there are 2 things I would recommend. The first thing is, if you don't want to get speaking right away because you're not sure whether French speakers will understand you, then what you can do is a technique called shadowing. What this means is that you listen to some piece of text being read in French and then you just repeat it, just right after it, like a parrot. Obviously, you shouldn't use something too hard because you're not going to progress as fast, but shadowing is a really good way to start speaking confidently. Once you're done shadowing, you should really get speaking with a real native speaker. The best thing you could do is to go on italki.com, which is a website where you can find people who are trying to learn your language, and you can do some language exchange. So what I typically do for my Japanese is that I talk with multiple people. We usually do 1 hour Skype sessions. So typically we spend 30 minutes talking in French, where I correct their mistakes and tell them some tips for French, and then we spend 30 minutes speaking in Japanese, where they teach me Japanese. I've been doing this for maybe 3.5 years now, and I can tell you this just works. Because in step 2, if you remember the grind, you're just, learning, and sometimes, it's very hard. You're spending a lot of time learning new things. It's not always very interesting. But here in step 3, when you're talking with native speakers, you can actually talk about whatever you want, and it's always very interesting, especially when you meet great people. If you can't be bothered with that, trying to find people and trying to, teach your own language to your language partner, another solution would be to hire a teacher. And you can also do this on italki, and it's quite cheap most of the time. They're actually native French speakers from France or Canada or other countries who are willing to teach you French for a very reasonable price. You can find lessons for $8 an hour. Typically, it will range anywhere in between $10 and $15 per hour. My recommendation would be that you try to at least speak to one person every day for 1 hour, and the rest of the time you should try to continue what you did in step 2. That is learning vocabulary, grammar, conjugation, and so on. Okay, so that's it for today. If you learned something new, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can just click on the button below this video. And if you want to get more tips on how to learn French and get plenty of free French learning resources, then head over to lewislin.com. Now I want to turn over to you. What kind of French learner are you? Are you a visual learner, a reader, or a listener? Let me know by leaving a comment below right now.